Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon here in Virginia City at Piper's Opera House for the Nevada Off-Road Association Annual Summit meeting. It's been now it's been a whole day's worth. We started yesterday afternoon. Had sessions this morning, very, very informative. The groups, how they interact, it's great networking. I've seen a lot of folks here that some I know, a lot of the racing folks that I know, Legacy's here. Of course, Vora is here with Laura Butcher, and Motorsport Safety is here. Dave, had a chance to talk with Dave a little bit about some of the stuff that he's been doing on Facebook with racing and sending out tidbits about the communities and towns along the race course of the different races that we've had here in Nevada. Thank you very much, Dave, for taking that and doing that. It's been absolutely fantastic. And of course, Best in the Desert is here as well. But I've seen other folks that I've run out to on the trail and actually have spotted Jezebel and me on the trail. For instance, BLM. One or two of the officers there, BLM, I shouldn't say, well, the other officers, but they're a great group of gentlemen that I've come to know out as I ride around. One particular I run into 2 years in a row out in Hawthorne. And he's here, said hi to him. And it's been a great networking opportunity to see some of these folks. Met some folks from down southern Nevada, Pahrump. Be looking them up when I'm down there race week. I try to get down to race before a few days before the race and try to run some of the areas around there. And so it'd be nice to have some folks that I can call and say, hey, what are you doing? Let's go for a ride, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the information that we have been getting has been just wonderful. This afternoon, we are going into partnerships for preserving cultural heritage in Nevada. Very, very important. You've seen some of my videos out there, some of the sites that I go to, whether it's an old boomtown or an old mining area, take photos, videos of the area and the ruins that are out there. These folks are dedicated to preserving that and making sure that that stays there year after year for those after me to come back and look at. And then later this afternoon, we're going to be doing an education session navigating the SRP program. That is the I believe, the public space usage program. They're going to walk us through how to do, I believe, permitting for the off-road community. I can tell you this, that the names that are on there, Matthew and Laura Butcher and Tammy Owens, they are very interactive with a lot of folks.
I'm giving this really, really nice biography of everybody, and I can talk about how, somebody started in the trenches and now they're, the general of the army, or whatever the case may be. I so much more enjoy not having to do that. So I'm going to talk about Rayette. Rayette Martin is up next. She's going to talk about the interface between motorized off-road recreation and cultural preservation and protection. Rayette, and I just referred to her as this morning, she's our pocket archaeologist. And the reason I say that is everybody has their tool set, right? Everybody's got their stuff in their pocket, their phone, their keys, whatever. And when you need those, you reach into your pocket and you grab them. Same thing with Ray. Every now and then something pops up, and I just don't know the answer, which happens a lot, by the way. But I can call Ray and be like, hey, this is happening, what do you think? And sometimes it's like, oh, no, we need to get on this. And other times it's like, no, we knew about this forever, which is kind of a nice barrier. Now, Rayette and I met, about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess now. I got a call from a woman by the name of Tammy Force. I don't know if anybody here knows her. She does the NV Tammy website, Ghost Towns and Beyond on social media. Good friend, lives on the other side of the valley from where we live. And she called and she goes, hi, you don't know me. I just got this report in from some off-roaders that one of the ghost towns, Pine Grove, the one that Senator Titus spoke about this morning, that people have been dismantling the buildings out there and using the wood for campfire wood. That's generally a bad thing, okay? So what we did is we worked with Tread Lightly and we got a little bit of funding to go out there and do some remediation work. And we kind of disguised it as a fire prevention thing. We cut back some of the brush from the buildings and a little bit of a defensible zone, but let's be realistic, it's in a canyon. If there's enough wind and fire, there's no such thing as a defensible zone. But that being said, we did all that, and as part of that, we had to bring on a representative from the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, because somebody picks up a widget, if it's over 25 years, over 50 years, you gotta leave that widget where you found it. If it's a Coors Light can, you can pick it up and take it with you. So in conversation with the SHPO representative that came out, she said, you gotta look these people up. Nevadans for Cultural Preservation. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll get right on that. So she said, no, you really got it, you gotta do it. Their executive director, Rayette Martin, she used to work with them at SHPO. She used to work at SHPO. She's got this really kind of cool project going, which teaches people, A, what you're looking at when you're out there, because a lot of times people don't know, and B, how to report damage when you see it. So she's going to speak a little bit about that. Fast forward 18 months or so after we did that, we applied for a Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission grant to put in fences. I mentioned that briefly this morning with Senator Titus. Really, really cool. Rayette came up with her team, and I can't believe I'm going to tell this story. So she comes up, and they basically did a site survey, which is as simple to the uneducated, untrained eye as looking at the ground for a couple hours. And at one point, I don't remember who it was, but somebody on your team picked up a piece of obsidian, and what's the term that they use when they break it off of a piece of the arrowhead when they're making flakes? Okay, so someone had picked up this flake of obsidian. And Ray says, yeah, that's when they were making arrowheads. I'm like, okay, but we're in an alluvial plain, we're downstream from all this flow. And so I asked her why that was important. And she blew me off bigger than anything. She's like, because then we know there are people there. I'm like, what I was really asking in my uneducated, ineloquent way was, why is it important that we need to know that there were people here when we know that this piece of obsidian started way up the hill? That's what I was really asking. And every time we work together, that comes to my mind, because now I know that I need to be very specific when I ask her a question. Because I'm going to get the answer, but it's probably not really the answer to the question that I was hoping for. So with that, Rayette, all yours.
I gave him my political answer, which meant no answer. So I'm gonna take this off. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So as Matthew said, I've worked with the Nevada Off-Road Association. I've done a lot of other work with organizations. Real quick about me, my background is I'm originally from Alaska. Grew up off-roading as just part of our general lifestyle, hunting, fishing, that kind of thing. Moved to Las Vegas over 20 years ago now, so it dates me a little, and never lost the interest in doing that. But today I'm going to talk about how we all as land users can partner with each other to preserve, as everybody's been saying, our access, but also the resources that we enjoy visiting. I run Nevadans for Cultural Preservation with Katie Hoffman back there. She's our president at our booth. I'm the executive director and founder, and we're founded in 2013. And our big thing is we cannot expect people to care for things they know nothing about, follow laws they've never heard of, or protect things they cannot identify. So that's why I'm the pocket archaeologist. I'm really about sharing as much information as I can so that we're all on the same page and can make educated decisions about what we're gonna do. All right, this is a big jargon-filled definition of what cultural heritage is. A little ChatGPT helped me with that as well. But the main things that I'm talking about are the physical materials, like that lithic, that flake of obsidian, combined with historical events. So it's placing those things together, connecting them. So we've even got the Comstock on there, 1859. So when we're walking around here, when we find artifacts and different things, we're asking ourselves, how does that reflect back to the Comstock? Was it pre-Comstock, post-Comstock? So we're really looking at that timeline and what that means. Okay, when I talk about cultural heritage, I'm talking not only about, we always think of pre-contact Native Americans in the past, but I'm also talking about their descendant communities that are here today, as the explorers, the trappers, the ranchers, the farmers, the settlers. Raise your hand if your family's been here for more than one generation. More than 5 generations. 10? Okay, we're getting there, right? So, I mean, these are the folks that I'm talking about. This is this heritage and legacy that we have in our state. And then I'm just gonna do a couple photos here to illustrate these things with a little bit of a timeline. This is out at Valley of Fire at Lattle Rock. This is a UNLV school out there recording petroglyphs. Have any of you visited this before? Couple folks, yeah. And then when we're going out tomorrow, we're gonna go to Lago Maracino, which is a really well-known petroglyph area not too far from here that has, I believe, thousands of motifs as well. All right, and then this is Tokima Cave. Has anybody been to that? A handful of you. And what's really nice about Tokima Cave is you got public access is right there, right? So you got your campground. They do have a fence or a barrier for getting into the shelter. And it was used in the past and it's used by tribes currently today. So it's currently being utilized. All right, can somebody tell me what's unique about these petroglyphs that might help me date them? Go ahead, yell it out.
Apparently shows a prospector.
All right, we're seeing a prospector. Anybody else? Go ahead. Yeah.
The coloring is lighter, so it's newer instead of it being darker.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about that one first. So the idea was that the coloring is lighter, so therefore it's newer, meaning that that desert varnish hasn't started to regenerate on the stone. That, unfortunately, happens on each rock individually at a different time. So you can go to something that's 100 years old, and it looks like it's 1,000, and you can look at something 1,000 years old, and it looks like it's 100. So it's not a good indicator. It helps, but it's not real accurate. But the fact that we do look like we have somebody on horseback, that gives us an estimate of maybe when we knew people were first coming through, like the Spanish. And petroglyphs were done and continue to be done. It's not something that stopped as soon as settlers came over. Speaking of settlers, in Las Vegas, we have the Old Mormon Fort, which is the first non-native settlement. Up here, I believe you also have a fort. Churchill, Fort Churchill, right? And then there's also the, what is it? There's another Mormon fort.
Mormon Station.
Mormon Station, that's what it is. Okay. But it's funny that it's got the Old Mormon Fort name because that was only a sliver of the timeline in history, but it was the LDS community that came up with the funds to preserve and protect that. All right, then we end up with towns that come in. You guys got plenty of those. This is Lake Mead, and what's unique about it is St. Thomas was flooded, and now it's, with the drought and everything, it's a resource we have to manage again. So we will find propellers next to the old, ice cream shop. And then we have mining, and a lot of times these things went hand in hand. You have the mining coming in, the ranching supporting the mining, then the railroads come in, all this stuff kind of builds on itself. Here's a ranch. And of course, we got to put people somewhere, so we have our cemeteries as well. And charcoal kilns. Has anybody seen charcoal kilns? Okay, funny story. I'm moving to Nevada. I have no idea what's going on. I thought they were some kind of cool habitation, right? Not the case, but it would have been neat. And the railroad ties being repurposed and reused, that's something that's common. And can dumps, right? But a can dump, because there's enough of it together, is actually a cultural site. Activity happened here, there's enough evidence we can piece things together. It's not just the artifacts. So artifacts are essentially things that are made, used, or modified by humans that can be portable. You can carry them away. And they're found within archaeological sites. And it's that relationship between that artifact and that place that makes the story. So if I just have a projectile point or an arrowhead, cool, I have some on the table. Wow, that's neat. But it doesn't really give us a story. Or I could go out and see a mine, but all it is just an adit, right? Those holes in the ground we're not supposed to fall into. That's not a very cool story unless I see the tobacco tin and the other stuff from people that were camping there. And so this is a piece of ceramic. So I can't really date a roasting pit very well. I already explained the challenges of dating petroglyphs, right? Because the patinas change. But I can use diagnostic artifacts like the obsidian, that particular can that has the manufacturer information, or a decorated piece of pottery, and I can then say a little bit more. I can't definitively say, but I can say during this time something was going on here. So that's why if you just pick up a piece of obsidian, or you pick up just a can, or you pick up, just a ceramic sherd, we could lose all that information by just removing one item. And the other thing is, we're creatures of habit, but actually there's resources that we all need. And what is one of those resources that we all revisit? It's in short supply in southern Nevada. I notice up here it's not so bad. Water, right? So our springs, down there we have Tinajas, which hold water. So you end up with both pre-contact, which would be your traditional Native American types of resources, plus settler resources, plus ours today, right? And our trash and all those other things, because we're humans and we're messy and we leave stuff behind. So it's really kind of neat to see these things overlap. And I can't talk about how neat they are without talking about the laws that protect them. I'm going to do it real briefly because you can always look them up. But we were talking a little bit about the Antiquities Act earlier and the ability to create a monument. But the other part of that is it was the first legislation that made it illegal to remove, damage, or destroy cultural resources on public lands, right? People were going out to battlefields, they were doing collecting, and it was getting out of hand, so they finally put a law in place. Great. But then they don't update it until 1979. So that whole period, it was like a slap on the wrist if you were even ever prosecuted for it. So it didn't get strength or any teeth or guts to it until 79. And then we have Nevada-specific laws that protect things on state land as well. Now, this is something I didn't think would be an issue anymore. So a lot of times when you go in the Southwest, people were digging up individuals to get their grave goods. That's where you got the cool beads, the different, materials. And we had to put in act NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, to get those resources back to the tribes, but also to strengthen the penalties when people are excavating. So in this cabinet, in a tourist area that I will not mention, there is a white rectangle. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, there it is. And that is covering the human remains that were in the photograph, which illustrate and prove that all of these goods that were in this case, most all of them, were removed from that burial. And it is something people go into this museum type visitor area, and they see it on a regular basis, and there's nothing there to tell them that's not what they're supposed to be doing. So this continues on today and is a problem. And then there's always leaving our names behind. So how many of you grew up kind of rebellious and, you know, partied a little bit? Maybe your parents didn't care if you came home at night, right? There's some nodding and stuff like that, right? I did too. And this is what I expect from young people that are out doing that, right? Putting their names on stuff, scratching it in. Maybe shooting stuff we're not supposed to. But when we see old things, we don't, all old as in historic things, right? Like that's some pretty nice looking metal siding. It doesn't look very old. That's the stuff that we usually will damage and destroy. We as in me in my former life. But paintballing pictographs wouldn't have been on my list of things to do, right? So there are boundaries and expectations, even when we're young and stupid. So when we see stuff like this, it's even more heartbreaking. Right? And then there's, I'm gonna take it home with me. I don't know what you're gonna do with it when you get it home. Maybe put it in your fireplace, mantle, I don't know, but then that causes irreparable damage. This is Pine Grove. This is what we were talking about, where they were, and accidentally people were driving over. They weren't doing it on purpose, right? A lot of the graves are not marked, and they may just be a circle of rocks. And it takes archaeologists and other people that are specialists to be able to be like, I think there's one there, and then we have to come in with ground penetrating, like radar stuff to let us know for sure without disturbing. But hey, they're gonna give it a shot and see what they can find. That's what this is. This is a historic grave down in Gold Butte. The BLM wasn't patrolling the area due to some issues, and so people were like, hey, let's take advantage of this, and they went out and dug up an individual. Does anybody see what's wrong with this particular picture? Bottles or cans on top of the rail. Anyone else? So, do you ever visit places and there's kind of like piles of stuff? So moving it from its location, again, messes us up. Because sometimes we have like a foundation or an area where we think there was a building, and then if the trash dump is near it, we can get a better idea that, oh yeah, there was a soda fountain there, right? Because then the soda bottles or whatever might be nearby. Or this was a pharmacy because we found this kind of trash nearby. So when you go along and you pick up a few things and you put it in a pile so everybody can see it, oh, this is so cool, I'm gonna share it with everybody, you're actually really confusing us. So we can't do our jobs. And it doesn't look that cool, I'm sorry, that's not very exciting. So partnerships has been the theme of the day so far. I was driving down yesterday, but I heard maybe partnerships were talked about yesterday as well. And so my goal is to have partnerships between citizens, that's you all, State Historic Preservation Office, which can sometimes be unreachable, right? This weird entity we don't know how to deal with. The off-road community, public land managers, which there's some folks here today, and private landowners. And I'm gonna have some asks on you all. So I'm gonna be like, oh, you had lunch, you're good, hopefully you're feeling generous. Everybody here is familiar with tread lightly and leave no trace, at least that they exist and what their general goals are. So for cultural resources, I created a citizen steward pledge, which aligns with those, but is a little more specific. So the first thing is we want to go out and take pictures and not take things, right? I kind of covered that already. Now, when you take pictures of things, we were talking about geotagging earlier today for the mines so people can figure that out. If you take a photo with your cell phone while you have your location services on, you post that super cool photo of that thing you found, and then somebody will go get the georeference off and that thing won't be there anymore. So be careful about how you're sharing your photos, that you're not sharing information. All right. Tread lightly, right? Stay on these trails. Don't go off the trail. One of the issues with cultural resources is you can't necessarily identify it. So there'll be a sign and it says, oh, cultural sensitive area, and you don't see what they're talking about. And you decide, well, I just want to get over here, I'll just, cut a corner. Well, now you took 5 ceramics and you turned them into 100 because you just drove over them, or, that kind of thing. So you may not be aware of what it is that you're seeing. This is, I believe, I haven't been there yet, Lago Maracino. It's gonna look really cool, right? And so we wanna visit these petroglyphs and pictographs carefully. That's really vague. So what is something you can do when you visit petroglyphs or pictographs that will prevent visitation damage? Does somebody have a no? Don't touch it. Yep, the oils from your fingers and things like that will change things. Anyone else? Okay, so most of the time, oh, yep. Yep, minimize your tracks and stuff in the area so there's less visitation from others, and then also as we do that, it encroaches, and boom, we're there. Go ahead.
Sensitive areas, stay on the trail. Don't climb up the cliffs to get a selfie in front of a petroglyph because you're going to knock it down.
Yes, so when we're in areas where the petroglyphs are up on the side, for example, like this picture here, don't go up walking all in there. If there's a trail, stay on the trail. And usually what they'll do on those trails is they will indicate where the coolest stuff is located anyway. The other thing is petroglyphs will also be flat. So there's an area called in Gold Butte, Little Finland, right? So it's all this windswept, cool red sandstone, and they call it Little Finland because it looks like fins. And in that general area on that type of surface, there are petroglyphs, but they're on the ground. So you're gonna walk on them if you don't know what you're looking for. And they're not super sexy, they're not super obvious, so just be mindful of where you're stepping. All right, just like the mine presentation before, when in doubt, stay out. And what I'm referring to is also your four-walled structures, right? Old historic cabins and that kind of thing. Nobody's out there maintaining these for public safety. If they do get to the point where they are causing issues or somebody gets hurt, if you go out and you get hurt, they're likely gonna have to take it down because somebody else is gonna go out and they're liable. So don't get hurt so that we can still go see it. That would be great. So when in doubt, stay out. And do your part by reporting any damages that you find, because then we can get ahead of trends and we can stop further issues. But because you're part of the off-road community, it's even more important that you're the ones reporting this. Because then I can say, out of the 100 public reports we got this year, 95 of them were from the off-road community. So when you tell me you want to close access to these areas because it's the off-road community damaging it, I can come back and say, actually, they're the ones stewarding it for us. They're the ones who can physically get there and they're taking care of it. Of course, I had to put leave no trace on there. Pick up garbage, obviously, not if it's 50 years old or older. And if you have a question, leave it there. If you really want to know, send a picture to me and I'll tell you, or I'll find somebody who does know. And the big thing is sharing the importance of preserving Nevada's cultural heritage with others. 50 years old or older looks like garbage to me. There's abandoned old trailers out on our public lands. I would think it's junk. Who cares if it falls down? But we've had people in the past hook up their vehicles to see if they can pull it down, and they just got slapped with an ARPA violation, Archaeological Resource Protection Act violation, and they were on the National Park Service. Oops, right? And it's like, well, that's like asbestos in it and there's, you know, insulation hanging out of it. Just don't mess with it, you know, not worth it. Now on the table in the back, I have some online reporting cards, and I would love for everybody who leaves here today to have at least one, if not a stack of them for their clubs and their friends, because on the back, there's a QR code. So you're out doing what you do, going the places you like to go. I'm not gonna tell you where to go. You see something that makes you upset, right? Then you snap a picture of the issue with your phone. When you get cell phone service, you scan the QR code and you fill out a little form. It uploads the pictures from your phone, you hit send, you're done, right? Super easy, so there should be no reasons you're not doing this. Now those reports, they don't go to me, because I'm just one person, and my job is to share this information with everybody and get out and go riding with you guys and go do stuff. Instead, it goes to the State Historic Preservation Office, which is under the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, through their Nevada Site Stewardship Program. Really, all you need to know is because it's a state-run program, there is going to be somebody in that seat who is to take your reports, whether I'm around or not. Then those reports get logged and cataloged as something that happened, and it goes to the correct agency archaeologist. So you don't have to know if you're on Forest Service BLN or where you're at. You send it in, we figure that out, and that report goes to the archaeologist, not their manager or anything, but the person responsible for that resource. So you're skipping over a whole bunch of middle folks. And how do you know this exists? I've been going out and doing some club education. I'm available to do additional club education, so if you wanna shoot me an email, let me know if you're ready for something like that, please do. And as I learned, I did get a grant from the OHV Commission to create the OHV Ambassador Program and do this kind of work. And through trial and error and work with the Dunes and Trails Club, who's taking a nap after lunch, because they've heard me talk about this, is that I reduced my training and I've done some other things and I learned, ooh, I missed something. So I'm gonna go over a case study with you. So they had my training just as a club. A group of them went out, as they should, enjoying their public lands. They were in Arizona and they came across a cabin that was severely damaged. And the first thing they did was they went to their local law enforcement to tell them what happened. So this is up in Mesquite. And the damage was in Grand Parashant National Monument. Okay, so the first thing that I need to tell you all is your local law enforcement, in a lot of places, they're not gonna know what to do with that information. If they can't catch somebody in the act, it might just die there. Or they may attempt to contact folks, but it isn't gonna make it where it needs to go. So always use that online reporting system that I was talking about, because that's your backup. All right, so this is the obvious evidence that they left, so kind of them. It's the name of their off-road club. And then Gato, who was part of their off-road club. And so, I mean, it's pretty darn obvious. It wasn't like Bob was here, okay? Yeah. So you don't want to share this publicly. Think you're part of the investigation. Once you come across something like this, you're like, okay, now I'm part of the team that's helping law enforcement get these. Because me telling them is just a slap, like whatever, you're annoying me, fine. But if I can get them under an ARPA violation and make an example out of them for something this egregious, it's worth it. They didn't just pick up an arrowhead and not know they should take it home. Okay, so in the world of social media, how many of you follow some type of off-road club on social media? Okay, all right, dirt bike, anything like that. It doesn't have to be Facebook. I'm old enough to where Facebook is mine. Some people are on Instagram. If you post on Instagram, it goes on Facebook. I don't know, it's all connected. But these folks are at the cabin. And this is the club name that's on the cabin. And the date is roughly the time the damage happened, okay? So, as the individuals who found the damage First, we don't want to post it. That's the first thing they did. Next, we can do our own investigation to help law enforcement. Oh, these are okay, I think I know who was out there doing it. Okay, but then they contacted them. Because they're mad. They're mad. Wouldn't you be mad if that was a cabin that you like to go to and all of a sudden it's got that red paint all over it? In addition to that, one of their club members is like 5th generation and their family used that cabin as part of their ranching rotations. So that person was really pissed, right? Okay, so they contact them. There were words over social media. They were bad words, lots of them. And there was finger pointing and I'm gonna come find you and that kind of stuff, happens. They're impassioned, but we don't want to confront them and we don't want to push anybody to remove graffiti. And I'll explain that in a minute. But this here, if you can't, I'm gonna read it for you. This is the after photos that they shared on Facebook saying we cleaned it up. And it says, well, we did what we could. I'm sorry for what some members of our group or some guests did. But what was done is done. This serves as an experience for us not to make mistakes again. It is human to make mistakes and recognize mistakes and still face consequences and give yourself respect before the off-road community. It is the school in which you never stop learning. You simply have to know how to face mistakes. So they pretty much admit they did it. Or people that were with them did it. But that got taken down, right? So law enforcement doesn't have that because people wise up, oh, hey, we're gonna get in trouble. Maybe we shouldn't do this. Okay, and this is their graffiti removal. Does anybody see anything wrong with the removal?
Still there.
All right, I got chiseled it off. You gotta speak up a little bit. Grinding. Okay, so to me this looks like pressure washing and grinding. And so what happens is if you don't know how to do graffiti removal properly, you just made irreparable damage. So what I could go out and get removed, it'll never be exactly the same, has now turned into actual damage of the stone itself because this is a soft sandstone. And then they pressure washed inside and made it to where if I had to go feather that out to where you couldn't notice, I think the estimate for me to clean up the damage they did from their graffiti removal was close to $10,000. Because I would be out there with my drill, with my Dremel, with my, brushes and all that kind of stuff for days, trying to get that to look like nothing has ever happened there. Not that anybody would pay me to do that, but they needed to know that the damage to the structure was enough to charge them with an archaeological resources, right, violation, and the significance and severity of the damage they did. This is not putting your name on the mirror in the bathroom, right? Totally different. So what came of this? One of the hardest things was I was trying to post into the social media as they were talking, wait, no, don't clean it up, drop it. You're gonna get slapped with a violation for doing that yourself. But they were so impassioned, right? They're just gonna keep pushing. The other thing was I tried to find the right archaeologist to get a hold of, and that took me like 2 days to find them because I started with one area, it's on the border, right? And then there's 3 different names for that cabin. So I'm calling it one thing, they're calling it something else. So eventually I got that nailed down and got the right people. Well, the right people said, well, this isn't a publicly interpreted site, so we don't care. They shouldn't be there. They didn't say we don't care, okay, but that's what came off. They said, well, they shouldn't be there. I'm like, they're there. And just because you don't have a sign telling us what it is, people are still gonna go there. How many of you visit places that don't have signs on them? How many of you like to visit places that don't have signs on them? Oh yeah, right? So I don't care if it's set aside to be publicly visited, it is, and you have to manage it and deal with it. So that's my attitude. So what came of this is a new sign in stand, like a sign in, like a little open it, you can sign in that you were there. And in there is a laminated sheet that talks about the history of it in like 3 sentences. But it brought up conversations and is a point for us to learn. And it was something for me to learn that in my training I needed to talk more about this part of it, right? Not only when you find damage, go ahead and report it to us, but don't get in the way of an investigation, right? Just because you're mad. Okay, I had a video here, but I don't think it's hooked up to do that. Let's see if Matthew can do it, and if not, it's okay. You guys are highlighting that one. Bruce is in it. Right? Yeah.
So if we go to an area that is either right on the border, we're not sure if it's Arizona, Nevada, or whatever, or even if we do know it's not Nevada, would you be a resource so we can reach out to say, hey, we found this thing in southern Utah, like where should we start looking, or who should we go to for this thing?
All right, so the question is essentially like, what do we do if we're not in Nevada? Because I've like put myself in Nevada because I have to have a boundary, right? Yes, if you are in Utah, Arizona, California, feel free to reach out to me personally and say, hey, I was over, and you give me a coordinate or point to it on a map, and then I have resources I can get to figure it out. I want to be your pocket archaeologist, right? Just don't squeeze me. I think he was talking about squeezing things or something. I was like, oh, don't squeeze me. But yeah, so I want to be here as a resource. The other thing is, I don't know what this is, Rayette. Can you tell me what this is? Sure, send me an email with a picture, right? Send me a text. Anything like that. I'm here as a resource, and if I don't have the answer, I might know somebody who does. I was telling Katie back there, our president, I said, Matthew's such a great resource because I can have something going on and be like, hey, who at the BLM should I talk to about this? Or, hey, who should I reach out to about that? Yesterday, I think you had the Trail Finder folks that were here. It's okay if you can't play it. And so I just wrote a grant project for Lincoln County where I'm going to be doing the OHV ambassador push, but also updating all of the trails they have about the cultural resources, because they have a ton of interpreted cultural sites, and I want that information to be available when you're looking at your map to be able to click on it, learn more, download. There will be virtual site visits for some of them, so you can do a virtual site visit from home before you head out to see if you even want to go there. I mean, my goal is to make all of this as accessible as possible. All right. Don't worry about it. It is the video that I have on loop on my computer when it doesn't go to sleep. And what it's showing is an actual OHV preservation ambassador going out and doing the work. And so Bruce, you want to raise your hand? Yay! With the Dunes and Trails Club is an OHV ambassador, and he has adopted a site that he goes out to visit about once a year. And it is a site, oh. Okay. Well, now you get to see Bruce in action.
If you love to explore Nevada's backcountry and have an interest in preserving Nevada's heritage for future generations, you should become a trained OHV preservation ambassador. By visiting sites like this old mine, ambassadors document changes, both natural and human caused, and leave artifacts like tin cans and arrowheads where they find them. Ambassadors can submit an online report on any cultural site in Nevada on public lands. They can also adopt sites along the trail like this head frame, which they are asked to visit
Not a
once
head
per year.
frame.
Reporting becomes another part of their adventure and shows the dedication of the OHV community to preservation. There are thousands of cultural sites across Nevada, from historic mines and ranches to ancient petroglyph and pictograph sites. Ambassadors help keep sites safe by removing things like charcoal if it has been used to vandalize sensitive rock writing. And they help keep an eye on the area by tidying it up and removing modern trash. hope you'll take our training and become part of the team of OHV enthusiasts protecting our access to cultural sites through stewardship. You can take the training by scanning this QR code or visiting nvfcp.org/OHV_preservation_ambassador. Many thanks to Dunes and Trails ATV UTV Club of Las Vegas, Nevada, and this project was funded through a grant by the State of Nevada Commission on Off-Highway Vehicles.
That was made in-house with a GoPro on the different rides that I take with Dunes and Trails. So that's essentially our main project to train folks to get out there and monitor sites that you already go to, right? So one of the restrictions I have as an archaeologist is I'm not supposed to tell you where things are located unless they are deemed public. Like that archaeologist was like, oh, the public's not supposed to be there. They're already there. So that would be an example of a site that you could adopt because you know where it is. You could check on it. You could let me know, hey, it looks good. It looks good. Oh, there's a problem. And the reason I want to know when it looks good is it will help me narrow down when bad things happened. And it will show your active involvement in monitoring cultural sites as part of the off-road community, right? So if I only hear bad things, hopefully I don't hear anything at all. But if I get all these good reports, then I can still say, hey, out of the 100 reports, 95 of them were from the off-road community, and hey, we only had 3 reports of something bad happening. So that's what I want to encourage you to do. Ready? So the first step to becoming an OHV preservation ambassador is to get educated. And the thing I learned is we all have short attention spans, and I went from a 30-minute video to 10. It includes videos, so not terrible, right? And then what next thing you do is when you're out, you report the condition of sites. That's it. So you don't have to say, Ray, I'm gonna volunteer and monitor this once a year. I wanna know whenever you're going out and you come across something, hey, is it looking good or is it looking bad? Especially if it's something that you know the name of, like when we got to Lago Maracino. If you happen to recreate out there and you find damage to it, let me know. Or hey, I was out there, it looks good. And we'll just keep that dialogue going and that information coming. And then we want you to share the preservation ethic, right? That's a big part of it. So that's our number one thing. When everybody leaves here today, I want you to know, hey, if I'm out and I see something, I can report on it. To go above and beyond, like Bruce is doing, you can adopt a site. That way, you kind of let me know, hey, this is a place I care about. Then when you send in your reports, all you have to do is put the name of the site. You don't have to put a location or anything else. It makes reporting a lot easier. So you're like, hey, I went out to Lago, looks great, date, here's a picture, and then you send it to me again next year. So it makes it a lot easier. All right, so I talked about the intersection of off-road activities and cultural site preservation. So I've been trying to put myself right in the middle of that. That's my goal, is to put one foot in off-road recreation and one foot in preservation, because I enjoy both. And so I like to support both of those at the same time. So we've already talked about some of our projects, like the Pine Grove Cemetery. This month I'm going out to Cold Creek. It's a ranch, but it's also an OHV staging area. We're gonna remove some graffiti down in the Las Vegas area. I have been hopefully working with the National Park Service to talk about Government Wash in the Overton Arm area. For those of you who don't know, the Overton Arm area is home of the Lost City, which is a huge cultural site. It was Pueblos, and it was flooded, and now it's not. So it is an area that we need to take care of, but it's also a great area for crossing the rivers and getting out on your OHVs and exploring. And then the Bureau of Land Management, I have a grant hoping it will come in to do outreach and signage for the Silver State Trails. And the signage is specific to the cultural sites along the trails, because I know there's other organizations who have done signage, but it's also kind of to bring that, why is this important? So when we see something, yeah, that's cool, but if I tell you a little bit more about it, you're gonna care a little bit more about it, and you're gonna wanna report and talk about it. And this is the signage we were talking about on the fence. So there's an opening here where you can walk through. So we have our maps, our tread lightly information about the people who we know are buried there, but also information about people who are likely buried there due to historical research. So when you see that unmarked grave, it could be so-and-so, right? Kind of cool stuff. Our do's and don'ts, and then a little bit about Pine Grove itself. Now, I do work with private landowners as well. In Las Vegas, how many of you have heard of Summerlin? Right, and then that's owned by the Howard Hughes Corporation, essentially. That's their big investment area. They have a cultural site that is up on the mountain that had been neglected for 30 plus years. It was a huge party area. It's up on the side of the valley, and the coolest thing is the views from there. So I would have totally partied there as a young person. I would have gone up. There's all these cool rock formations that cause windbreaks. You know, you could see out, have your bonfires, mess around. But unfortunately, the spray paint is on top of petroglyphs. But they're petroglyphs people can't really tell are there. So that's where that education piece comes in. We said we can't expect people to take care of things they know they can't identify, right? So we cleaned it up, and what's cool is Howard Hughes Corporation bought the Metro Police substation there in Summerlin, a little UTV that they are able to go monitor the area in. I don't get a ride in it. No, I have to take my truck out there, but that's okay. And then I have signage with a QR code that takes them to a website, and it's nice. It says, help us protect it. It's not, don't do this, you're trespassing, we're gonna call the cops on you. It's like, you're already here, so we might as well ask you to help us take care of it and let you know why. And my ask for you all today is to do your part. You can go onto our website and sign the stewardship pledge. Take the training to become an OHV preservation ambassador, and report damage that you find at cultural sites. I want you to be part of the community that I can say is participating. And share this information with your clubs back home, anybody else you go riding with. Like I said, I have plenty of the cards you can take with you. And that's me. So. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Uh-oh.
The difference between a petroglyph and a petroglyph.
Pictograph.
Thank
okay,
you.
So a petroglyph is so the surface has been removed. So the light stuff was showing underneath, so that's a petroglyph. A pictograph is like a picture that's been painted, and what it is something's been applied to the rock, whether that's charcoal or ochre that's applied to make the image. And we find a lot more petroglyphs because they stand up to the weather than we do pictographs. And you're most likely to find a pictograph in like an overhang or something like that where it's sheltered. So that's where you'll find those. Everybody knows everything. They're like, it's post-lunch, we're good. All right, well, thank you.
Well, you know, when you're performing. So our next session is going to be, if I'm remembering the schedule correctly, it's going to be about special recreational permits. Anybody have the agenda in front of them? Does that sound right? Okay. This is going to be somewhat in the weeds, very BLM specific. There's going to be a lot of people here who are never going to deal with it. I'm not going to be hurt if you get up and leave. That's the warning. But before you do that, since today's the day where we actually get the most robust participation, the way that we do the Nevada Off-Road Summit is somewhat like, and I love sports analogies because everybody that knows me is that I follow basketball or something, football, baseball, whatever, one of the ball things. Home and away. So this is our home year because the majority of us live here in the Sierra Front Range. Next year, we are tentatively planning, if we're funded, to do this in Elko County. The year after that, we'll be doing our home game again. Our team has been having the conversation of making Piper's Opera House our permanent home game location. What's everybody think about that? Show of hands, good or bad? Anybody think it's a crappy idea? Ray? It's a good thing that you've already spoke, because I'll tell you. So yeah, so next year, if everything goes well, we will be up in Elko County. We have a project up there, Jeff's motocross track. We want everybody to get a chance to see something that's a little bit more out of the box thinking for motorized off-road. They've done an amazing job on their project, and we'd like to highlight the projects and the successes of the OHV grant program. So we're going to do that. While we set up for the next thing, which again is about Bureau of Land Management paperwork. If anybody else has any questions for us, and let's call it a day. Have at it. If not, you have been warned. All right? 10 minutes. All right, real quick, as everybody's kind of walking around, tomorrow for the ride, we're going to be leaving from the parking lot of Silverland Hotel. So just have that in mind if you're bringing in a rig. And then tomorrow morning, what we're going to do is we're going to find out exactly how many seats are available. Kate, are you bringing the skate rig? Then don't even come. You're not even wanted to. Okay, no worries. But we'll have a kind of a good head count of seats that are available, and then we can address our list of who's available to go on the ride and so on. And then when Kate gets all up to speed and things are running, by our next home game, he'll drive us. Awesome. All right, everybody. 10 minutes.
Enough to walk outside. Hey. Yeah. So what territory do you have?
Man, I've seen you many times.
I know. I was standing there going, I know I'm from somewhere, but I don't.
I always see
Which
you out
territory?
there. So I used to be in Stillwater.
Okay.
Out there in Fallon.
Okay.
I saw you out
Okay,
there
yeah.
at Hawthorne.
Yeah.
When I was pre-riding already.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the Sierra Front, so just
Oh, are you?
yeah, just took that
north?
north like a month ago. This whole area.
Oh, up here.
Basically, all the way down to like Mark, Indian Creek.
So then when I
up to
see you
Moonville.
out riding, then it's for pleasure.
Yeah, hope so.
Going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good.
I'm Megan. Best of the day.
Desert Rider. Nice to meet you. Did you get?
Question.
Yes.
Are you going to, there's a lot of people who would also like to see the video. Is the next presentation going to be recorded?
It's all on my channel.
Okay.
So the live stream is on my website, linked to my YouTube channel.
Okay.
It'll be on there for a year.
It will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if any of the chats come up, there hasn't been any chats, but when we get to the QA session tomorrow, if there's any chats, if there anything comes up, we'll be interacting with that.
Okay, cool.
But all of my content's on, especially the YouTube channel, either way.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I know that for like the next SRP section, there's a couple of the other promoters who just couldn't make it.
Yeah, if they can't do it live, it's better. Yeah, absolutely.
But okay, cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
adjustment. I thought that was nice. So.
We had to develop a process to explain how this somebody else is going to take it. I can't wait. I can take it to me. I can take it to the state. So the whole possibility, but I can't do is too high. And then it's
most interesting and gripping. The story to end all stories. The special recreation permit process. Woo!
All right, everyone. So if everybody that's going to participate in this, if you want to take a seat, so the next hour or so, too, we have all night. We could get right into the nitty gritty, right? Right? So today we're going to have Tammy Owens. She works for the BLM. I want to get your title. Tammy Owens is the recreation lead for special recreation permits for the off-highway vehicles, trails, and travel management. And so Tammy will be leading the presentation, and then we're going to go through a mock-up from two different perspectives. Matthew Giltner will be providing the non-competitive SRP application process, and Laura Butcher will be providing the aspect from the racing competitive aspect for the SRP. So,
yeah. Thank you, Alexis. Is my voice okay? Do I need to? Yeah? Okay, awesome. Previously, before working for the BLM, I used to work for the National Park Service, and I would give presentations for 1,500 people. So I do have a Park Service voice. I can get louder if you have a hard time, and hopefully my pronunciation is okay still as well. As Alexis mentioned, my name is Tammy Owens. I'm the program lead for 4 programs. I'm one of 4 humans at the Nevada State Office for the Bureau of Land Management, who provide policy and guidance to the field rec planners that you all work with for special recreation permits for travel management, OHV program, and the trails, both motorized as well as non-motorized. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about special recreation permits. And the special recreation permit process can be a little confusing. It's really difficult because there are, I think we have, 10 field offices in Nevada, and they all do it slightly differently. And so there is a process, there is something that we all follow, but there also is some opportunities for the local offices to put emphasis on areas and also be able to do what works best for their office. And so today, we're going to be talking about that process, why you need one, and why it's a good thing. My argument is, and this is also Navora's position as well, is having a special recreation permit actually provides a case for the federal government, also for the public, that this is a valid and existing use out on public lands. OHV users traditionally have been not very organized, and this is another opportunity to show that you are out there using public lands of all kinds, whether it's BLM, Forest Service, those rare instances of the Park Service, that you do actually are out there, you do use the lands, and also frequency and type, that sort of thing. We'll get into that. So special recreation permit, let's go right, the very nitty gritty. What is it? It's a special authorization that allows for specific uses of public lands. So this is anything that is not considered casual use. And casual use is actually a term from the Lands and Realty program, but it's also going to be a mechanism in which we recognize that use is not just going out on your side-by-side and touring through the countryside. There's some sort of component that then kicks it up into that special designation to provide for a permit. It's also a means to protect recreational and natural resources. I am a couple of days off of the playa up in Pershing County for another recreational use on public lands. And absolutely, when you get 80,000 people on an area, we're absolutely going to be concerned about those recreational and natural resources. And so that's another special recreation permit. Can also build the case that we're going to be concerned with any other use if we're permitting it. We want to make sure that what we're doing is not going to cause irreparable harm to the resources that we manage, as well as making sure that we're protecting the recreational value of those lands as well. It's also a way to provide for the health and safety of visitors. Those of you that have had a special recreation permit through the BLM know that there's stipulations that we attach to those permits in an effort to make sure that we are providing for the health and safety of the participants, the visitors that might also be out there, and the folks that generally just use public lands. It is a manner to provide for coordination of events. So maybe you've been out there where you've been on a poker run, and maybe there's a second poker run that is unpermitted, and they're using the same routes as you are. It can get confusing. So it's also a mechanism for us to be able to kind of track the use, and we absolutely have had that. We received an application earlier this year for a race event, and then a few months later we received another application for another big long distance race a week later, and we can't support that. So that was a way for us to kind of track and kind of see when these events are happening, and making sure that we're being a little bit judicious on how often we're going out there. Not so much how often, but so that there's really, to lower that conflict among the users. And then the very last reason, provide fair market return for the use of public lands to the US government. This is not anything new to recreation from the standpoint of, since, gosh, I think it was in the late 90s is when we first started charging for special recreation permits. And this is also a means and a mechanism that other uses also provide a fair market return for public lands as well. So you see that in the grazing regulations and programs, you see that in rights of ways for folks that may need to have a road over BLM to get to their private. You see that in mining. All kinds of programs also contribute to this fair market return for the use of public lands to the United States government. It's not something that a lot of people like, but if you are using public lands for specialized use, then our congressional members and folks in the federal government pass laws and have said that if you're using it for a special purpose, you have to provide a little bit more monetary value to help kind of recoup those costs. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. So what's in it for you? Why go through the hassle? Why go through the headache? Why go through the coordination, the extra money, and why solidify your use on public lands? It's really pretty simple. It documents an existing use of land for motorized use. And that's really important. As I mentioned, the OHV community traditionally has not been very organized. And this provides us to be able to say, hey, yeah, we absolutely did permit 25 poker races in 2024. That's totally a made up number, so don't quote that, but we have those records to go back and say that this was a use, this is a use happening on public lands. And there's three little icons here to kind of help prompt me. First one, of course, is the desert tortoise. Earlier this year, I was in conversations with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we are in the very end stages of doing a programmatic environmental assessment that analyzes the use of motorized motorized use permitted through special recreation permits. And we came to the Fish and Wildlife Service and we said, we want to use these 3 routes down near Mesquite. And they said, well, you know, that's critical tortoise habitat. This is an OHV exclusion zone. You can't really do that. And the Fish and Wildlife biologist said, well, have you been having permits through this area? Kind of a grandfathered in type situation. Yeah, we went back to those special recreation permits and we said, we did it this and there and here and here and here, and guess what? We are able to retain those uses for those 3 routes. So having that permit was a really great way of demonstrating to the Fish and Wildlife Service that that was a documented use, and they allowed us to then use that and analyze it for that document. So a win for the community. We see the solar array, the fun little icon. There's been examples. I know that Matthew has talked about engaging with our solar partners in this. And what it does is, as all of this solar development comes into Nevada, what we can then do is say, hey, we've got a permit on this route. Let's talk about what we can do to kind of minimize the conflict that may be, because the solar folks, of course, don't want people buzzing by and putting dirt on those arrays, those panels. Let's talk a little bit about what we can do to mitigate the impacts to the OHV community based on that historical use of those permits. And then, of course, the sage grouse. Could it be coming soon? Would it be listed? We're trying really hard not to put it in that position and to conserve the habitat for that area. But if we can demonstrate and show that OHV use has happened on those routes, who knows? Maybe that's a great way to have that conversation of like, look, we are using these routes. What can we do to kind of help mitigate some of the impacts to sage grouse if it's listed in the future or whatever ends up happening? So those are really great examples of why it's important to go through that permitting process and why it can potentially help us in the future. And then, of course, another reason, it's a formal acknowledgement of the type of use, the frequency, and the size. We can go back to those permits, go back to those post-use reports and say, hey, we had 50 UTVs or 50 side-by-sides or 125 trucks go through for a specific permit. So again, it's a way for us to paint the story of OHV use on BLM lands. So how do you know if you need an SRP? This one's really, really super tricky. It's very, very nuancy. Offices, I know, I have been a part of offices where folks have come in and they say, hey, look, I don't want to do a permit. That's fine. But there's going to be probably some give and take and some structure on what it's going to look like. There may be some changes to what you have planned if you don't want to do a permit. Or the opposite, if you do want to do a permit, what kind of permit category would it fit into? And so these are some questions that typically come up when the field rec planners are trying to kind of decide, is this a permit situation? What type of permit situation is it? Because the fees do vary. But the big one is if you're charging a fee, or if you expect to make money on the event, or if the fee is to cover expenses. Big thing that people think, or I guess is a misnomer for folks, is, well, I come up and I'm a part of whatever OHV club. Well, let's not do that. Patty, I was talking to Patty at lunch. The Desert Wranglers, they're a nonprofit. They're a 501c3 entity, right? Yep. But just because they are a nonprofit doesn't make them exempt from going through the permit process and paying the fees to the government. So the nonprofit status is not the litmus test of whether or not fees will be charged. And that's something that a lot of people get confused. Some other questions, will there be a competition involved, you know, with the race, or make it to a certain point by a certain time? Are you advertising? Advertising in itself does not necessarily put it into that permit situation or that permit box, but it's the type of advertising you do. If you're marking a course, that's going to indicate it's a little bit more organized than others. Is there anyone being paid to organize, lead, or participate in the activity? That's going to be, again, these are mostly questions just to tease out the details. And then will your event involve public lands? Again, not everything that happens on BLM needs to be permitted, but these are the types of questions that the field rec planner, when you call them and ask about a permit, they're going to be asking these questions or some sort of form of these questions to kind of parse out exactly what you have planned. And I wrote on here, it's okay to have a conversation. And I think that's probably some of the feedback that I've been working with partners and other folks, especially at the state office, is they think of us as BLMers as being, I guess, authoritative or unapproachable and scary. And I want to tell you that most of the rec planners that I know are not any of that. And we're humans, we're people just like you. We live in these communities, we function out in the public. we just happen to have chosen an occupation, or sometimes people just happen to work for the BLM for a couple of years and then they move on to something else. We are you. So please don't let that be a barrier. And just because you have a conversation with a rec planner doesn't mean that we're going to be watching out for you. Yeah, after we have that conversation, we're probably going to be, looking out if we don't hear from you. We might even email you and say, hey, we had this conversation. What do you think? Are you thinking you want to do this? But that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you approach us and you have a conversation with us that we're going to be breathing down your throat. So keep that in mind. Our workload is quite heavy, and for us to be able to do that is unrealistic. A really common question that we receive is, what are the fees or the costs involved with a special recreation permit? And again, that's going to be very specific to the type of permit that is authorized or issued. A lot of our OHV permits run into that commercial aspect of a permit, which the fees for a commercial event is 3% of gross revenue. And that includes entry fee, or should include entry fees, sponsorships, donations, broadcast rights, trophy fees, etc. Any type of fee that is paid to a promoter or paid to a permit entity is included in that gross receipt as defined by the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. That's the regulation that sets up this program. And so that is the commercial event is the 3% of that gross, and that is the fee for the government's fee for issuing a special recreation permit. We have other types of fees as well. If it's purely considered a competitive type permit, it's $7 per person per day. But again, most of the time our OHV permits are land in that commercial aspect, and that's the fee to expect. Again, that's a really great question to ask the field rec planner. Hey, if you end up permitting, what would this be? What would the fees be? And they can absolutely talk to you about that. There are discounts off public lands. So if you have a race and you go 40% private land and 60%, that's a bad one, 60% would work. 40% private land, 60% BLM, you would receive a discount off of those fees. So 3% is the most that you would be paying. Fees are retained by the office, and they are subject to reporting requirements. I can put the URL up here, but it's just as easy to just Google BLM spend plans. You can go up, you can find Nevada, then you can find that specific office, and you can see where your special recreation permit fees are being used. That is a requirement for us to be able to collect fees. We are held accountable. We do submit these reports. They go up to the state office, up to headquarters, they get approved, and then they're posted online to help you show you where these fees go. Now, juxtapose that to other BLM programs, such as like lands and realty. That money that you would pay for, say, a right-of-way, that money goes to the treasury. So that goes to headquarters. Mining royalties, guess what? Goes to headquarters. The other types of fees that you are paying for use of public lands that aren't recreational in nature are going to headquarters. They go into the treasury, and they're shared amongst the entire government. Your special recreation permit fees and the fees that you pay for recreation stay in your local office, and they're used towards those resources that are on the ground for your specific office. And I think that's also a misnomer of people think that it's just, well, I pay taxes, why do I have to pay? And that's for you to figure out. I can certainly explain it to you, but for most people to kind of get through the rationale of why that happens. But if you choose to get a special recreation permit, those fees stay in your office. There are some offices, I think there's only one in Nevada, they actually retain those fees and are able to hire staff to be able to work in those offices. They collect enough money. It's Red Rock National Conservation Area. And so that's the only office that actually generates enough money to be able to pay for staff. But the other offices, we do projects like painting of restrooms, purchasing those CXTs, those vault toilets in campgrounds. What else has been done? Road grading, I'm just trying to think off the cuff here of some of the projects that we've done. Built more tent pads, expanded campgrounds. They put out signage, all kinds of programs, all kinds of projects that are being done with those fees that are collected in the office. There is a minimum permit fee of $130. And then right when I was making this slide, I received some feedback from someone. They thought that $130 was an application fee, and that's not right. So that's why I wrote in there that's not an application fee. That would be returned. So if you talk to an office and you get down in the nitty-gritty, you fill out an application, and and you decide to withdraw that application before it gets processed and before that event is held, that money goes right back to you. It gets refunded. Or if you choose, you can roll it over if something happens. But it's important to note here in Nevada, we do not have an application fee. So if you've already paid that $130 and that permit has not been processed and you don't end up going through with it, that money is refunded. Now that's the minimum permit fee. There are people in this building that have paid a lot more than that because their event has gone through and they have realized the permit through its full livelihood, I guess, if you want to call it, but the minimum fee is $130 per year. There's also another cost potentially, it's called cost recovery. That is a law that was passed by Congress that says, yeah, if you do work on public lands and you are required to receive some sort of authorization and it takes more than 50 hours or more to be able to process this permit, it gets kicked into this cost recovery idea that basically you are paying to have that permit processed. And that's just a way for folks with more complicated permits or more specialized permits that take 50 hours or more are paying the government back for the processing of that permit. If you have a very simple permit and it's less than 50 hours, then you don't pay cost recovery. That permit, that money to process that permit is covered by, well, not really covered by the $130 for the minimum permit fee, but that is included in that. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind if you decide you want to go down this route and you want to lower the cost recovery, if you have a complicated permit, what you can do is do the pre-application meetings. So before you even submit an application, meet with the office. And you can have as many pre-application meetings as you want. And they're all free. They don't charge that, they don't charge towards or be counted against cost recovery. So you can hammer out the route, you can hammer out any issues that there might be, time of year, that sort of thing, prior to submitting that application, and that lowers the cost burden if you find yourself in that cost recovery realm of things. So, little tip. Next slide, tips and tricks. The first one, talk to the BLM office before submitting an application. As I mentioned, anything prior to submission of that application is free, doesn't cost a thing. The rec planners want you to talk to them because a lot of these rec planners, they know the areas that you're going to want to use. They know the time of year restrictions. They know if the route is a good one or not based on your proposed use. So talk to the field office. I can't drive that point home far enough for you guys to go and talk to those folks. Start with the conversations with BLM as soon as you think you might want to hold an event. But no less than 180 days before use. We have a regulation that states an application must be submitted 180 days prior to the requested use day. And there are some offices, nowhere in Nevada yet, that require more time than that. But it's really important to talk to those offices, get a lot of things hammered out as much as you can, submit your application, but make sure it's 180 days prior to when you want that use to occur. Consider asking help from others who've done it. Laura Butcher, Matthew Gildner are really great contacts. Both of them have gone through the gamut of permits. There's other folks in this room. Whoever your contacts are, reach out to the field office if you know a specific rec planner who you think can help you, but lean on those other folks who have done this before. Don't try to sweat this out in a vacuum. Use the contacts that you're making here if you think that going down the special recreation permit route is the direction you want to head. A lot of very valuable people in this room who know how this process works. Talk to the BLM office before submitting an application. Have you heard that before? Please talk to those offices prior to submitting an application. It's so, so important. It can save you money. Provide clean data. This is actually something that we've talked about already. And Dan Dole knows what this is all about, because guess what? He showed me this. And this is a really great example of why it's important to show clean data. So what you're seeing here is, it's mock, this is not real, but the grayed out area is BLM. That's kind of on the right-hand side of the photo here, the picture. The red data is an example of what gets submitted, but you can see that the green data is actually where the road actually, the contours of the road are. But for this example, it says T&E nest site. T&E is threatened and endangered nest site. So it's right, for the purposes of this illustration, this mock example, the T&E site, nest site is right off the road, but the unclean data that was supplied to the fake field office goes right through that nest site, and if that happens, the biologist is gonna flag, and they're gonna say, no, you can't use that route. When if you had provided clean data, such as the green that actually follows the contour of the road, it's possible that they would have no problems with that. So it's really important to provide clean data to the field offices once you put that application in, submit that application. And check in regularly with the BLM office. Our outdoor recreation planners, they have more work than probably double the size of the staff that they have. And it's really important to remind those offices, hey, what's the status up on this permit? What's the issue? Where are we at on this? What it does is that helps the rec planner honestly remember that permit needs to be worked on. It also kind of provides an opportunity for them to be, oh yeah, I need to reach out to so-and-so biologist or so-and-so archaeologist and make sure they've resolved any of their potential issues or provided mitigations or whatever the situation might be. But my recommendation is to contact those field offices when you don't feel like just because you haven't heard from them that necessarily that they've forgotten it, but also kind of help remind them that this needs to be done. I don't want anyone's anxiety to be higher than it should be because they're waiting on an answer. Sometimes having that little poke is advantageous to the folks who are, think about you and your work. If someone provides that little poke, it's like, hey, where are we at on this? Sometimes that spurs you into some action and be able to remind, oh yeah, I've got this permit coming up. I need to get it out for a signature, whatever the case may be. And then, yeah. It's not my staff. And be respectful, I wouldn't go weekly. It really depends on where you're at. Once a month? I would say once a month in the beginning. Be like, hey, where are we at? Has there been any progress? Because what's gonna happen is if you reach out too much, they're gonna start ignoring. And they're gonna be like, I'm hearing from them too much. What my point is don't be afraid to contact them and ask them for an update. And talk to them. Hey, when can I see this? If they say, okay, we're gonna see movement in 2 weeks. Oh, okay, can I contact you in 2 weeks? Have that conversation, communicate with them. Say, hey, when's the next time I should be seeing something? Okay, if it's 3 weeks, okay, I'll contact you in 3 weeks. I know that folks are reaching out, and sometimes they are being ignored, and sometimes they are not receiving anything. But I also think that reaching out and asking them where they are on that continuum of processing the permit is also a good thing for you folks as well. Yeah. Yeah, Greg? Yeah, no, okay, so the question is, if we're expected to turn an application in for 180 days, what is the burden on the BLM to provide an answer to you? The official answer in our handbook is when the office receives an application within 30 days, you should be receiving some sort of correspondence that says that we've received your application and we are processing it. There should be some sort of communication from that office 30 days after you put that application in to say, hey, we accept this application, we're good to process it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but there is 30-day mark of some sort of communication saying, okay, we've got everything we need, we're going to start processing it, or we can't process it because we need these things. Yeah. I know that doesn't happen, but that is in our policy to do. Paul Fuselier has his hand up. Introduce yourself, Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul Fuselier. I'm the Recreation National Conservation Area Program Manager in the Carson City District. Just one more tip and trick is, especially with OHV related permits, and it really goes for all permits. If it's a realty permit, a wildlife permit, any permit, ask for what you want. If you want to, ask for every single route you could dream about using for that race, for that poker run. If you're a land developer and you want to right away, and don't come back to us halfway through the project and say, well, I need another 10 feet on that right away. That drives us absolutely bad up. So ask for what you really want, what you really need up front. One, if you're under cost recovery, it'll save you a bunch of money, not getting sort of last minute changes to the project. You'll get more response from us if we know everything up front, then sort of in a piecemeal fashion, and then plan for weather contingencies. If your event is crossing a dry lake bed and you're in the south in monsoon season, have an alternate route that you're proposing. Up north here, we get sporadic thunderstorms. Have alternate routes that you're submitting so we could analyze those up front, get them approved so it doesn't become a last minute emergency.
That's really great. Thanks, Paul. Awesome. Check in regularly with the BLM office and then provide requests as quickly as possible. That goes on both sides. It's on both sides. But what I have seen and I've personally done is I've communicated with a potential an applicant and I said, hey, I need insurance or I need a route or whatever I'm needing, and I won't hear from them for 6 weeks or a month. And they think that providing that to me 3 days before the permit or their proposed use, is enough time for me to get all of the people that need to happen and look at this and sign off on it and be okay with it, and then boom, we're ready to go, which is not the case. So I think that on each side, if there's any requests, that we both need to be working as quickly as possible to get that box checked so we can keep going with the permit. And then the very last thing I will say one more time, talk to the BLM office before submitting an application. Okay, I think that's it for us. So the next part of this session is going to be an opportunity for you folks to kind of see what happens on both sides, both from the BLM as well as an applicant's perspective on how we work through these processes, and kind of an explanation of kind of behind the scenes of what happens with these permits. So I am joined again with Laura Butcher, who's going to be talking to you from the perspective of a race promoter, as well as Matthew Giltner, who's going to be talking to you about a poker run or a non-competitive event type thing. But I see Larry.
Before you get away.
Yeah.
You haven't discussed Raptor.
Okay. What would you like to talk about with Raptor?
Its future.
Its future, it's happening, it's here, it's in Nevada. 2025 is the goal to have all offices using Raptor. And those of you that are not familiar with Raptor, another acronym, I can't tell you what it means. Recreation, something permitting, processing, that sort of thing. It's basically an online version of being able to submit Raptor, or excuse me, being able to submit your applications online. It's also a really great way of, it's accountable for us too, because what happens is folks can log into that that website and they can kind of see where they are in the process. And it is not perfect. I will be the first person to tell you it's not perfect, but we are getting there. It is happening. I don't want to say that it's still in production because people are issuing permits and using it. However, there are still opportunities to enhance it. And I've already got one bullet point or one thing that I'm going to be taking back to my office and emailing the Raptor representative in headquarters, because this is a headquarters thing. This is not a BLM Nevada thing. This is not a Carson District thing. It's a headquarters, it's BLM-wide. Going to email them and say, hey, sometimes we have multiple people on a permit who need to see where they are at on that. Well, if you submit that application through one login, you have to use that same login to kind of see where you are on the spectrum of the timeline. And so one of the points I'll be making a recommendation for is to allow multiple people to see that on their dashboard. Is there anything else, Larry, that I can talk to you about Raptor? Okay. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the timeline of when most offices are going to be converting. So we had Carson District and Las Vegas District that have made the conversion over from paper to this Raptor, this electronic version. The next is going to be Tonopah and Battle Mountain District. No, that's the same district. Ely and Tonopah are next. They turn the light switch on the Raptor on this year, and then next year is going to be Elko and Winnemucca. Elko was without a rec planner for the last year and a half, and Winnemucca has the really complicated Burning Man permit, so we wanted to wait on those two. But that's 2020, 2025, everyone should be on it. Now, if you have an existing permit, an existing paper permit, that goes through, it continues, and then that next time, that if you have a 10-year permit or a 5-year permit until expiration, then you'll want to use the Raptor to be able to renew that permit. Yeah. Kevin.
If I want to submit in Las Vegas field office,
Mm-hmm.
so if I want to submit a new permit, I do not do the paper process in Vegas?
You can still do the paper, but we're really encouraging folks to use the Raptor platform.
Is there more information about Raptor on the Vegas field office besides going to Matthews?
There is online. I'd have to look up the website, but if you send me an email, Kevin, I can get you a link.
And I'm not here to cry.
No.
For anybody that doesn't, my name's Kevin, full-size rig. I am SRP holder. I'm here poking questions for everybody else. I've already got my own 5-year problem. Poking to help along.
Yeah, educate.
And smile as I do it too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You might take a look at your online BLM SRP. Look up when you use a computer and you go to
That's good feedback. So yes, thank you for that feedback. We need to be getting the Raptor stuff on there. The flip side of that, so that's acknowledgement of our mistake. The flip side of that is talking to your local BLM office. But I thank you for that. I will poke them to put that on there. I know. Yeah. 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 Larry's a repeat customer. Yes, and we are all set in our ways. I acknowledge that. I have a 4 in front of my age now, and I feel it. I feel it hardcore. Other questions before we get into that? Yeah, Craig. Yep. Okay, so the question was, what determines whether or not you're paying the commercial fee, which is 3% of gross, versus the competitive fee, which is $7 per person per day, or per participant per day? Because yeah, that can be very significant difference in the amount of money that you pay. It all comes down to definition. So if you're collecting an entry fee, that's a commercial event, because you are making money off of that event. So think of it this way. A commercial event, if it's commercial and competitive, so in the case of, we've got Legacy here, they hold races. It can be considered a commercial and competitive, and I'm sure you do too with Moran. It's commercial or competitive. If it's that, it's the greater of the two fees. Yeah. Yeah, so the other question was, can a discount be applied to either the competitive, which is the 3%, or the commercial fee, which is 3%, or the $7 per person? Yeah, so that discount can apply to either type of permit. Yeah, against all types of permits, whether it's organized group, commercial, competitive, that sort of thing. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. Uh-oh.
It's been a lunchtime, so I'm reminding everybody to use the mic.
Thank you.
One thing I would suggest on your pool points is adding ops plan to that.
Can you write that? Ops plan to?
Because under SOP application, there doesn't give a lot of room to add a lot of detail to your event.
Okay.
So to help your staff and those in the room.
Not my staff, the recreation staff.
Which is your staff. So to help all the recreation staff is the more detail you can provide these folks, the better off you are.
Yeah.
So if you're just doing a poker run, tell them you're planning on doing a lunch stop. Tell them you're planning on having a gas stop, all these other things. When it gets more complicated in the racing, we go into a lot of detail that we have a medical staff. We have this many pit stops. This is the polygon of the area and everything. So the more detail you give them up front is going to save you on that cost recovery. And if you want to get in cost recovery, how often should you email them? If you do it weekly, you can go into cost recovery. So do it maybe every few weeks.
I'm tempted to not have two numbers in front of a comma anymore in cost recovery.
Join the club, buddy. And before we go to the next step, you keep apologizing for your staff, and on somebody who's held permits for over 20 years, please stop doing that. Your staff has a challenging job. Yeah. We are a pain in the arse to work with, but for the majority part, we have never had a bad experience with any of your staff across the entire BLM.
Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Okay, well, let's get to the next portion. Alexis, can we have that? Yeah. I guess I need to explain what Alexis is pulling up. She's pulling up a document that BLM uses to kind of describe the process and allows us to kind of keep track of the process. I thought it would be very beneficial to kind of show this to kind of help inform us as we are moving through the process, because it allows us to prompt and to talk a little bit about our different perspectives. So I think what we're going to do is start. Who wants to go first? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Matthew's going to go ahead and go first. So I think what we want to do is to talk a little bit about the process, and of course, before you come and talk to the BLM, you develop that idea and you develop that process. So we'll start there, but I think you have other things to chat about too.
All right, show of hands, how many people have a permit or have had a permit in the past? What is included in line or block number 10 of your permit? Come on. The one thing that you're not doing, other people that are authorized to discuss it with the Bureau of Land Management. If you are not putting the Nevada Off-Road Association on there and you have a problem and you need us to go to bat for you, you just added about a week or so to the process, because I've got to get you to contact the BLM office that we're dealing with and have them add us. Then I need to get to that rec planner, find a time. So just add us. If you never need me, that's fine. That's fine. Super cool, doesn't bother me. However, we have had to insert ourselves, I've been asked to insert ourselves no fewer than 12 times, 11 and a half times. 100% success rate in getting the permit put through. But you guys do you. You don't need us, that's fine. You hit a roadblock, just add me to your damn permit. It's really that easy. The other thing, we talked about Raptor. I'm actually kind of a fan of Raptor because I'm a bit of a nerd. Does have some shortcomings. Two of them in particular that should be, I'm a prior military guy, so when you're in military class, you always hear this. That's code for write this down, it's on the quiz. Two problems with Raptor. When you sign in and you create your usagov.pass, whatever the heck it is, and you sign in and you get ready to do it, the first screen that allows you to do anything is, I want to schedule a pre-application meeting. Now, by the way, you should be scheduling a pre-application meeting, make no mistake about it, but it doesn't let you go any further. And I actually have a problem with that because the idea, is Donald still in the room? Yeah, okay. If I'm doing a poker run or a short course race or whatever the case may be, I would really like to be able to dump some of those track files in there on that first screen. Because at a minimum, like Dan Dole is who I work with a lot, Dan and Michael both, they can pull it up real quick and go, dude, no way, you can't do that because red-feathered tree slugs are dead Indians, whatever, right? So they have that even before we do the pre-application meeting, but there's no way that Raptor allows you to do that, and that's a bit of a problem. I think we also mentioned that you don't allow other people to log into that line 10. If you add 5 names of other authorized contacts, there should be at least 5 other additional portal entries that you can make. Those are pretty simple things. Across the board, Raptor I don't think is horrible. Some other points were brought up that I'm sitting here nodding my head on. Well, we have to do it 180 days. What about you guys, right? Yeah, I'm kind of on that team. If I'm meeting that 180-day deadline, you better believe that you've got some benchmarks that you need to hit, including estimated cost recovery, right? You are required to receive from the Bureau of Land Management an estimate of your cost recovery. Dan, was it 45 days after submission?
Sure, you say so.
Ballpark, but you do, because realistically, let's look at it this way. If I'm going to do what I think is a one-day event in the middle of nowhere or whatever, and they come back within the first 5-10 weeks, whatever the case may be, and say this is going to cost you $1 bazillion. Peace out. We're not going to do it because we're not going to make that kind of money to do that cost recovery. And I don't have a problem with cost recovery because I kind of get it. Same with permitting fees, I kind of get it. I do pretty much watch my spine compress when you have special recreational permit fees like Sand Mountain, which technically when you go camping there or use that, that's an SRP, individual SRP, and then they use it to pay salary for people that are out there. So Red Rock isn't the only one that actually gets people paid. I understand, but they're still full-time people. But it's not a new position, and that I agree with. But my mentality is these people are on salary. They shouldn't be paid additionally. But that's my opinion. I don't get to make those rules. But the last thing I want to say about Raptor, which I think is also important, and I did get this from Dan, and Paul Fuselier actually had just reiterated as well. If you're going to be doing like a rec permit rather than a race permit, or even race permit, I guess, but for the rec permits, give them a ridiculous amount of courses. Michael even sent me a note about this, about a different one not too long ago, because two things happen. One, oh look, there's a bird's nest, you got to go around. Well, now we're all kinds of screwed up because we only give them one option. But the other side of it is really kind of nice, is that if you have, let's say you're doing an 80-mile loop, if you give them 300 miles of track to pull that 80-mile loop out, aside from weather, fire, any of these things that can change the topography so you don't actually have that course anymore, the one thing that is really nice about it, makes it much easier for the issuing officer to give you a multi-year permit. And those are freaking gold. Because then it's just a matter of a few weeks before you do the event. Here's what we're gonna do. You've already looked at it, and they're like, awesome, have a good time. And that's where you wanna be. And we get that on about, I think that we're on 15 or 16 different permits in any given year. And we get that maybe a third of the time. So Raptor is not your enemy, but it does need a lot of fine tuning. And it does come in handy for folks like us to have that experience, right, Mike? Mike is one of our teammates that we work on a permit over. Lots of frustration on that. And the downside to that is it wasn't really coming from the Bureau of Land Management specifically. They were the conduit. We were getting, we bent over backwards, and it just became more and more frustrating. And that was one of those times where we had to pull the trigger and get the governor involved. We don't want to do that ever, but it gets back to that pre-application meeting and having that dialogue. But sometimes the Bureau of Land Management's hands are tied. They can't do it because frequently it's even the state of Nevada that's actually putting the stick to the front wheel of your bicycle. We have ways around that too. So that's kind of what I wanted to add, for critical, not criticism to the program.
So obviously, everybody knows I'm Laura Butcher at this point. A lot of what these two have touched on is largely stuff that we worked on creating together, and is kind of what I would go over with you guys. Obviously you've heard it a million times, but it is that important to have a pre-application meeting. I remember how nervous I was the first time I went into the Carson City District office for a pre-application meeting. I had it in my head that I was essentially meeting with the boogeyman. My mouth was so dry, I was so nervous, heart pounding. Why? They're just people. They're nice people. Are things always easy to work through? Absolutely not. And I continue to learn, but it's important to remember that each field office operates pretty much independently. And as interesting as I think their internal structure is, BLM functions in this really unique way where the field offices are all sort of independent of each other, and then you've got the state office that sort of oversees things and has some influence but doesn't tell the field offices what to do directly. And then even a step above that at the national level, there's not like a direct line that, in my background with fire departments, there's a chain of command and it is what it is, and that's how you follow protocol. You just go straight up that chain of command. It's not that clear cut and simple with the BLM. Fortunately, unfortunately. I mean, the field offices have a ton of discretion within their own area. So it's really important, I think, that you work on having a good relationship with the field offices that you're working with, and just kind of keep those things in mind. Does it always make sense to me? No. Does it always seem fair? No. I mean, the fact that you can have different field offices charging different amounts for, things that are pretty standard, it is confusing. I don't think there's anybody that would say it's not. And I know they're constantly working on improving things, and they do have, staffing shortages and everything else, but essentially the three of us are here to help. I mean, we work all the time on trying to make it better for everybody. So don't hesitate to reach out to us, see if we can help. I too have been listed on, I don't even know how many other permits besides my own at this point. I know there's a ton of you guys in here that have had all kinds of different permits. Don't hesitate to reach out for help. I think usually that ends up, being your best asset when it comes to kind of diffusing things or finding solutions to problems. So, I'm always here. You can always add me to your application, preferably after you've talked to me about it. Yeah, you have resources available to you. I think that's all I've got. Does anybody else have any questions or anything? Oh, you guys made this way easier.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it really well, actually.
Yeah, come on up to the microphone there. It's a little harder to hear back here.
So I recently had a field office ask for a letter of support, and it's just something that I've never considered in the past, but something I found that works really good. In Moran, we kind of made it a point to want to send letters of support from another nonprofit, a local organization, and the supporting organization and stuff too. Is there any other kind of tips and tricks that like that in such a that you could give any of us that would help in those directions? I mean, adding you guys to box 10 has kind of skimmed my head for a while, but I think I've caught up on that one now.
I know, it's a little confusing at times when you're like, why should I just be adding other people to this? But it gives us the ability to talk with BLM directly about your permit. It cuts way back on all the he said, she said, kind of back and forth over the top stuff. I too have written letters of support for BLM when they're seeking out grant funding or looking to work on certain projects. I think that's always a good olive branch to extend. I know they appreciate it when they feel like they're getting, kind of reciprocation on help with different things where we can.
One thing to add, I think having someone else, sometimes what helps is having someone who's familiar with the process in that box 10. And so me having a conversation, say with Megan with Best in the Desert, your old hat, it, but let's, for some, for the sake of the argument, consider you new. Maybe we're having a conversation, but there's that we're not quite getting the point addressed to her, for example. If we had, say, Laura or Matthew on here, and I could call them because they are listed on box 10 and say, hey, we've got an issue and this is the issue, and they understand it, then they could put it in, say, Megan's terms or whomever, the applicant's terms of, okay, this is the issue, here's how I have solved it in the past, or the field office is saying, you should do this, and maybe here's the reasons why you would want to do that. That's another advantage of having that other person knowledgeable about the process and knowledgeable about your use in that box 10, for example. And again, box 10 is that part of the application that who else can talk, who else does the BLM have permission to talk to regarding that permit?
The other thing on the box 10 edition, we can deal with both the applicant and the Bureau of Land Management, whether it's at Tammy's level. We lean on Tammy a lot, kind of at that higher level. Am I following the process right? Because it's kind of squirrely in my head, and I'm not doing it. But we also have those relationships at the field office levels. I mean, there are people, and they already know who they are, who we know that we can rely on to give us the straight scoop. But the most important thing about adding us is I can have that conversation and not be emotionally connected to the project. This is going to sound really crappy, I don't mean it to be. I don't care whether you have a poker run or race or not. I really don't. What I care about is that if you do not have a poker run or you do not have a race, it's your choice to do it, not because you've been told no. And that people are like, well, that's the same thing. It's like, no, it's not. I don't have anything in it, so to speak. You know, it's not my pride. It's not my project, with the exception of my 1 10-year permit in Smith Valley, but that doesn't count for this conversation. So but it's true. And the nice thing is that I can reach out to the Pauls, Michael, Dan, you know, using the local office and say, man, this is just way, what am I missing? And they're going to say, oh, you're missing because you didn't realize that they just found out that there's an Indian burial ground right there, but we're not allowed to tell you that. So what they'll say is, there's a significant cultural space in the area. I don't want to say we already know where they are, because we don't know, but it's possible that over the roughly 7 years I've been doing this, that someone keeps really good notes, just saying. So we can help steer you in the right direction. So again, being able to have a dispassionate partner help you get across the finish line is really what the goal is.
And I know sometimes it's like, oh, I've already done this a million times, but it's usually nice to have just a different perspective, fresh set of eyes. And I remember how many things I had to Google. What is CX? What is DNA? What is NEPA? What does SRP stand for? And there's just, it's like a whole other language that you're learning. So we're always happy to help, no matter how big or small the question is. Don't feel weird about reaching out.
This one's toward you, Tammy. Question on the SRP fees. Going into cost recovery, I'm just going to do some simple math. Okay, because I'm not very good at it either. Let's just say our cost recovery for the gold rush coming up in 6 weeks is $20,000. There's an indirect cost of 20.6 or 78. So let's just say it's $2,000, right? What do those costs cover?
That's a great question. So the indirect cost is something that is required, and basically what that covers is the administration. So that is the administration, so that's the paper in the printer, that's the ink in the printer, the phone lines for communicating, everything administratively for a permit, essentially.
Okay.
Right.
Right. That's okay, Matt. But my next question to that would be, would you say that's probably somewhat of a flat rate, like the same cost every time, basically?
I would say no, from the aspect of some cost recovery. So just give you an example, we have other permits in the state where their cost recovery is $2.5 million. That 20% is a lot different than your cost recovery of, for your example, $20,000. So that's a different example of the amount of the indirect rate being different. That is something, that indirect rate is actually also applied to, say, grants. So when we go out and get grants, we have to apply that rate as well. And we're having issues with it, to be honest with you. I don't think there's anyone in here that would be, wouldn't rejoice louder if we were able to get rid of that. That's gonna have to come from way above my head to be able to do that, unfortunately.
Correct.
So it does vary from the standpoint of different cost recovery amounts paid differently. Dan's got a question.
Yep.
Yes, hold on, give me 1 second. The other thing is, it does change from the standpoint of every year it's based on, I don't remember if it's like consumer price index or whatever, but it is based on and changes each year, but it's always right about that 20%. And Dan, why don't you come up to the microphone and introduce yourself so people know who you are, please.
Dan Dole, Park Ranger at Carson City. I manage a lot of permits. I was just going to get to the indirect rate also changes every year, and that fee goes to our National Operations Center. It does not stay in our office. It goes up there and they distribute it agency-wide for printer paper, what they set. So we have no control over that, unfortunately. Zero control. We wish we did, but we don't get people money anyway, so it disappears.
Thank you, Dan. Correct, I understand that. I know you can't change that, and Dan's not gonna change it or any of the polls, but, so my follow-up to that is, sorry, you're gonna get a repetition here. After the event, the cost recovery is done, and there's a post-use, and you guys go through the audit process, and there's money's issued back to us. Let's just say, that's $2,000 refund we get back. What we don't see is 20% of that $2,000 refunded as well on the indirect costs. So we paid it on the initial nut up front, but we don't also get another 20% off the $2,000 back to us, which would be about $2,200 versus $2,000. So is there something maybe we can look at that? Because it sounds nitpicky, but a few $100 here and there makes a big difference to a lot of us.
That's a really great point. That's a fair point. I can't guarantee it, but send me an email. Let me remind me. I'm saying that a lot, and please, normally I would be like on it, but after being on the playa for 2 weeks, I've got playa brain. So let's talk about it. These are the types of conversations of how things change, potentially. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but that's a really good point. That's something I had never thought about. Can't guarantee anything, but never hurts to ask, for sure. Thank you.
I want to sit for a minute. I'm sorry, Megan, go ahead. Oh, okay.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. So I just used the new wrapper system with our Laughlin permit, and I am such a creature of habit. I really like doing things the same way every single time, so I was a little bit reluctant myself to even want to try and use it. And it was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. And the nicest thing is that it kind of created a hub for all of the documents to be housed. So we had everything within there. KML files, the ops plans, the emergency action plans, just kind of everything, applications. So it was all in one, and it allowed for Courtney and I to kind of have that conversation back and forth, because I could see when she looked at things. So rather than having to go through my emails of the 9 different million emails I already get on a daily basis, it was just nice to have one simple system that had everything with the permit. So I just
Thank you for that feedback. Can you record that? Email it to me, because I'm probably going to need to hear it several times.
My question is, and I just don't remember because I'm old, does Raptor have a go, no-go feature, meaning that if you get to, for example, let's use a race for an example, and you did not upload your KML, GPS, that you may not proceed any further? Because if it had that, that means that it's going to be so much easier to have a complete application here.
I was going to say, I don't think it does.
Can everybody hear me, or do I need to walk over?
Kevin, just walk over. You know you want to walk over. Walk over there. I bet I already have an idea of what we're about to talk about, but yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, cost recovery, everybody's favorite topic.
Raise your hand if you don't have a permit. Okay.
Oh, Jim, but you have had a permit before, so put your hand down.
So we're talking about cost recovery, and a lot of times it does, if you dig down into the data, we're talking about paying salaries for the employees that are working the event, that are coming out from the Bureau of Land Management. So there's this clear timeline that we've put our time in, we've paid the bill up front, if we get all the detail up front. Final bill, clear bond. What is our expectations as permit holders to get that information back?
I was going to say, I don't understand what information.
Final bill. So we've gone through our event, the monitoring has been done, the report has been complete. Final bill. What is, as the permit holder, what is our expectations to be told that your event was, your cost recovery fee was, I'll use my last one, $9,000. You used and you paid $9,000. How much was left over? What is our expectations to get that detail?
You should be getting that detail, but if you're asking about timeline of when to get that information, or are you just asking for that information?
I'm asking when we should see that information.
Okay. And you're not going to like my answer. It depends. It depends on the complexity of the event. Let's use a really obvious answer of Burning Man. Obviously, way different than your event. Their cost recovery goes all the way into, I think, March, and their event happens in September. So a lot of it really depends, because cost recovery is, as you mentioned, towards salary, towards work, towards your permit, and if there's any monitoring that needs to happen after the event, if there's post-use report that needs to be calculated, the payment the processing of the payment, the evaluation after the event, all of that goes into the cost recovery account. I know you're frustrated about the timeline because we've had conversations about it, and the only thing that I can do is, again, talk to that field office and ask them, when can I expect to know when you guys are finished working toward my permit?
18 months?
That's excessive in my perspective. However, I don't have their side of the story either.
Again, remember, I'm doing this with a smile on my face.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about me.
Yeah.
People that are here to learn about permits, these are some of the hurdles, obstacles, roadblocks that they're going to run into.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to have open conversations about, hey, mine is frustrating. I've learned to live with it. Not even asking where my money is for the club and the event. But some of the other things about what are some real timelines, again, that we can have those. That's why I said earlier on, how often should we be asking to give people an idea? Once a month, every 2 weeks? Is this something we should not even think about for 90 to 120 to 180 days after to ask?
Let's ask, if you don't mind, Dan, Mike, Paul, Fuseli, talk to me about your experiences so that we can kind of help Kevin get a realistic picture.
So real quick, I'm not Dan. No, So our events are a little more complicated. Best Desert events are a little more complicated than possibly Kevin's. So I'll just use our example, and Dan can fill in the holes for me. It's called Project Logs, correct, Dan?
Yep.
And for us, Gold Rush, it's going to take us a week to 10 days after the event to clean up all the roads. We have to go grade all the roads after the event, right? So if Dan's my lead rec planner, he's got to be over 3 other field offices and get all their data put back in on those project logs. So out of courtesy, when I get through Dan's district, I'm going to send him an email and say, Dan, I graded these many miles. Then I'm going to get through Paul's district, I'm going to send him the email all the way through the chain. And then when we get all done and say, okay, all the grading's done, then I'll give them about 30 days, roughly. And then I'll reach out, hey, Dan, can I see those project logs? For me, I feel like giving them 30 days after the completion of your event gives them time to gather the data, and then you can start to see the answer. I'll let you through.
And so there's a lot of other factors in there. If we use our government vehicles, if say you got 30 days, it happens on the 3rd, the way our fleet vehicles are charged, we put your charge code that you're assigned for your event as particular charge code, so we gotta wait for that to clear all the way through. That could be another month to 2 months depending on the time frame. Depending on when the event is, like right now we're getting ready to go into basically our budget shutdown for the end of our fiscal year, where we can't access stuff until November. After the middle of September, we can't access some of our financial stuff until November, so we gotta wait for that. Other issues, we don't have like in our office right now, so your Gold Rush last year, the lead rec planner retired and left us with a bunch of stuff we had to go through, and I had to compile a bunch of stuff before I passed it on to the other Paul. But we also don't have a budget officer right now. We have no one running our budget, so for your event in particular, like 4 months ago, I asked the person who's trying to do our budget, hey, how much money's left in the account? Is there any more charges pending? And it sometimes takes a while because we're missing that key staff person, and that's another complexity to cost recovery and getting a refund. And then once we do that, we have to go through an entire process through our National Operations Center to empty out that account and issue a refund. So there's a lot of nuances, a lot of wild cards out there.
Kevin?
So from the frustrating part of money, think of it as your you're looking for a refund a year late.
I was just gonna say that, yeah. I know there's been a lot of frustration with not getting your refund before you're asked for the next bond.
Right, so again, put that in your personal playbook and operations plan, that your 2024 event, everything you put in, you're gonna see it probably, if it's an annual event, you're gonna see it around the time of your 2025 events.
Yeah, that's a big, I mean, it's a big shoulder.
Yeah, so when you're planning your money and you're working out your budgets, keep that in mind with your cost recovery fee. You're gonna lose, it's gone for a whole year. And you probably spend every single dime of it with BLM. And it's okay. And again, that's why I'm saying with a smile, put it out there a whole year that you're not looking for. And then figure out once it's coming back, what you're gonna do with it. Whether you're rolling it into another year on a multi-year permit, or you're gonna cash it out. And that's a whole nother fiasco of which way you do that. My suggestion is to make all your plans, or all your payments with check when you can, so that way you get a check back and not have to wait for ACHs. Instead it's like, I need a new document. And if you change bank accounts, it comes into play again. See, I'm smiling, I'm not picking, I'm giving good ideas.
Thank you, Kevin. I have one other thing that I kind of wanted to address because I know it's been a question I've gotten quite a bit in the last year or so. We don't have anybody like law enforcement, like Mike Yost isn't here, but I'm hoping Dan or Paul can maybe put some explanation on this. What is the formula for you guys on how many law enforcement officers are designated to any particular event? Because obviously we do have to pay for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say there isn't an exact formula. What we don't want is another Johnson Valley. That is the formula. You know, we're required by policy sort of to monitor, especially our competitive motorized events. Those should have a law enforcement presence by policy. But, you know, it really depends. If it's a, you know, the Vegas to Reno race, you know, we have many more spectator areas with a potential for a lot more problems. And we have a Moran race sort of in the middle of nowhere. Right, you know, very few spectators, maybe just a couple locals. That might not need a law enforcement presence. If there's a history of events needing a law enforcement presence, then we'll probably need a law enforcement presence. If there's known issues, we'll need a law enforcement presence. Especially if those issues haven't been well addressed in the past. You know, we'll probably need more of a law enforcement presence going into the future. You know, this year, we just recently had a race, and one of our problem areas wasn't a problem area at all. That was great.
Where was that, Paul?
Somewhere south of here.
I feel like
It was a race course exactly one whole slave further away than where I was. We spent the day together at checkpoint.
Paul Amar isn't here to go over all of his fun little like nicknames that he's provided me over the years of like the brunette hammer, the jujitsu master of words, and the Swiss Army knife of people. That's how he always ropes me into help with those extra things. But you can sort of change the weather over the course of time, I like to think, with good behavior and really being able to control with your operating plan and all the safety checks that you can put in place, all of that pre-planning, pre-organizing, well-executed events. You can, over the course of time, have a track record that holds its own.
I just wanted to add one more thing. We were talking about submit as many courses as you can. When you get your permit, work with your rec planner, have them send you an electronic copy so that you're both on the same playbook. We ran into some problems with that. Our applicant screwed up, no two ways about it, but we didn't know we screwed up. And it got some retired outdoor rec planners all exercised. Had we known that we weren't that we thought we had submitted for something and in fact we did not, had we known that, we never would have gone that way. So if you have a copy when you get your permit of this is what they've looked at, because they may have crossed sections off, which, you know, they should have told you, but maybe they didn't. Just make sure you guys have the same paperwork or the same track files in front of you. It adds a level of comfort and takes away a lot of the, what could be an acrimonious relationship over that particular event moving forward.
Quick go back on the staffing levels. On the events that cover a longer distance, generally require more law enforcement officers. They wish they could drive as fast as the buggies do, but they don't. So they're covering a greater distance, and it's, you know, there's just more officers needed to cover that distance than if it was a short circuit race.
Curious, in the process of a permit, I know different species and stuff may affect it as well, but what is the real difference of an area qualifying under a CX, a categorical exclusion, and an area that's going to require NEPA?
CADX is a mechanism of NEPA, but I understand your question. Let's break down. So there's a lot of acronyms in that. CADX or CX is categorical exclusion. We do have a categorical exclusion authority for BLM, and that is special for special recreation permits. That is an event or a use that takes place on existing roads, trails. There's one more word in there, Dan. Do you know what it is? Words, roads, trails, water, routes, something like that. Existing ground transportation linear feature.
There you go. That's the word.
So anything that takes place on there with lower than 3 staging area acres. So if you have a pit or a start area or bathroom placement or spectator area, anything related to your event that's smaller than 3 acres, that qualifies for the CX. Anything outside of that then gets kicked up to the EA, environmental assessment, which then is technically NEPA. NEPA, by the way, National Environmental Policy Act. That is a regulation that all federal agencies must do to inform the public of an impact of a proposed use. So in your case, motorcycle races, I think, is your gig. So proposed use would be a motorcycle race or some sort of an event. We then have to analyze and assess and display to the public the impacts of that proposed use. Is that, so what kicks it off is typically anything outside of an existing road or trail and anything larger than 3 acres for a staging area.
For staging, okay.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and a good way around that is to use private property if you can get it.
I'm going to quickly answer the other half of that question, and that was the DNA and the NEPA. You know, the DNA is tiering to a pre-existing environmental assessment. Generally speaking, not older than 10 years. We tend to stretch that a little bit, where there is no new reason. You know, like sage grouse was a new reason that kicked some things out of, some environmental assessments out of us being able to use them for a DNA determination and NEPA adequacy document. But generally speaking, an environmental assessment would have had to have been completed for a similar activity.
And I just wanted to add one of the things, if it helps keep it in your noggin a little bit here, the way that I look at the NEPA process is that each of the different differentiations, like a CADX, for example, they're all different levels of review. So, you know, a full EIS or an EA or a CX, each have different criteria. CADX is generally, and feel free to jump on me and tell me I'm wrong, are easier or take less work effort, less man hours for the local office. So if it can be completed at a CADX level of that NEPA review, everybody's happy. The BLM's happy, the applicant's happy. So if you can stay within those parameters, things tend to go a little bit easier. When you start getting into the full EIS and the EAs and what have you, you better have deep pockets and a lot of time on your hands.
I got one. I'm probably the newest off-roader of everybody that's here, but I have a large club and I want to make sure we're doing things right, and I've been told certain things, so I'd rather hear it from you. So of course, we do just regular runs, right? We just go out on trails. But some of our trail leaders have been questioned by rangers because sometimes we have 20 or 25 Jeeps out there and 40 people. So as a club, are we exempt from permits just for these type of runs? And if so, is there some kind of an exemption that we could have for our trail leaders if they do get questioned?
Thank you for that. As a club, you are not exempt if you want to go on these trail rides. My recommendation, you can kind of see, can't see it anymore. At the very top of this, oh, Alexis is going to, can you go to the, scroll to the top for me? At the very top of this paper that is displaying, it talks about that pre-application consultation, which we've been kind of honing in on. And it also then, that this kind of flow chart goes down and talks about a permit. But one of the things that we really didn't talk about were the other options that, there it is, that can kind of come off of that pre-application consultation. So when you talk to the local field office, if you're going to be in Las Vegas field office, or if you're going to go north into Caliente, or wherever you end up going, whatever office, I always recommendation is to talk to the office and say, hey, we're expecting this many people, this is what it's going to be a free event to whatever. You can talk through the process. It may be that they decide that they would like to partner with you and give you a letter of agreement that talks about, hey, this person has made contact with our office, we know what's going on, we know how many vehicles to expect, and it doesn't meet that threshold for a permit, but you've got that piece of paper, so if a law enforcement ranger does stop you, you can say, hey, I talked with Kenny at the Las Vegas field office, he gave me this letter of agreement, here you go. That might be something to consider, reaching out to that office and asking them, how they would like to manage it, and then you guys can go back and forth on what is the best way to proceed, whether it's a letter of agreement or if it's just casual use, just go out there, or if you're into a permit situation.
Okay, and is that dependent on like how many Jeeps we have? Okay, doesn't matter. So do we need one letter for every run, like every time? Because we're projected to do almost 200 events this year. So how do I handle that? Like what do I do when I get back?
Yeah. So I've already got that email out to Kenny to talk about the other issue that we were talking about over lunch, about having a representative come and talk to your club. Talk to him about how he best thinks that this would look. It might be that letter of agreement, covers you for the whole year. I doubt very much he's going to want you to contact him every time you go out. Especially if you're doing 200. That's a very active, very robust club, which is great. I can't say, that's where people want me to answer, not saying that you do, but people want me to give you the standard answer, and the standard answer is, it really depends. So talk to that local office and kind of see what their preference is and how best to handle those types of requests.
Okay, and then of course we're in Mojave, we're in South Las Vegas, we're up into northern Caliente and all that.
Yeah.
So would I contact each of those reps, or just through Kenny and maybe he can?
I would contact each of the offices, especially if you kind of know when you're going to go in those general directions. Because again, just like Laura said, each office is kind of works semi-independently, and what may rise to, and my answer to your question of does it matter how many Jeeps are going, there's no guidance. That we used to have guidance of X amount of vehicles or X amount of participants or that sort of thing, but it really depends on the resources. So middle of nowhere Nevada, where there's no threatened and endangered species, there's no sensitive resources, can support maybe more than say a riparian area that may have some concerns, biological, archaeological, or whatever type of concerns. So it really is dependent on where you might be going, how often, how much time,
between visits and how many people are going, that sort of thing. But if you primarily will be staying in that Las Vegas field office, can get you connected with the Caliente rec planner up, Leslie Phillips, or others if you decide to venture in other directions.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Tammy, if I would just add to that, just because the other thing why she's saying talk to your field office is you don't know what the legacy racing schedule looks like unless you go search it. You don't know what the best legacy schedule, you don't know what snore is, you don't know what bicycle events are going on, whatever. So if you reach out to that office, they have a good handle of what other events are going on. Because the last thing we want to do is you show up with 40 Jeeps, we tell you, sorry, this trail's closed today because we have an off-road race, right? It's not going to look good for either of us. So if you just contact that office and work with them, it just makes everybody's life easier.
Thank you, Donald. That's a really great point. Experts, you're all experts.
Actually, I have a quick follow-up question on
Yeah.
this. So, what is the threshold for you required in SRP? I mean, if I go out with my family of, say, 6 vehicles, right? We go out, I go out with a bunch of guys, say there's 10 of us, you know, at what point, if we're all going out and ride together, at what point do we become an organized group that requires an SRP?
And that is the non-answer of it really depends. I think, my opinion, if I was a law enforcement ranger and I saw 5 Jeeps and I saw that they were staying on the trail and they were respectful and were recreating responsibly, I probably would overlook it. But if I saw 5 Jeeps and they're going off in separate directions and they're going across country and they're hitting roads and running over bathrooms and that sort of thing, I probably would make contact with them. So I think a lot of it probably is demonstrated by behavior as well, and kind of the perception of what you're doing out there. And you've also got some law enforcement rangers that's willing to make the contact whether you're doing everything right or nothing right. They just want to talk to you. They get lonely in their trucks too. So there is no threshold. And I think a lot of it is if you think that this might be a permit situation, it never hurts to call and to ask the local office. But generally, if you're smaller in numbers, then it's less organized versus more number. And I know that's such a bureaucratic answer.
It really is, actually.
I'm so sorry.
I mean, honestly, I like the Rangers.
Yeah,
I don't have
yeah.
Come hang out with us, right? Because we're rarely doing anything wrong. But,
right.
But that there seems to be an implied, right, that there is a certain level at which an enforcement activity might take place.
Right.
But there's no line where I get to know whether or not I cross that line. That seems sort of fundamentally wrong.
Agreed.
So I'm not arguing. Once again, I'm just asking where the line is. If the line is if I have to call a BLM officer, I'm taking my wife out, we can do that. You don't want to hear from me.
Paul, I see you stood up. Is this related to an answer to this to help folks work through this? Can you come up to the microwave? Or to the microphone? Fly the brain. I promise I'm not hungry.
Yeah, so was your question in relationship to when a letter of agreement is?
How much organization makes your event organized? Do you guys have a name?
Well, I mean, there's.
It's so frustrating, I agree.
Hey guys, going out this weekend. Does anybody want to come with me? Did I just advertise my event? Technically, yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, it could be deemed that way.
It depends on how many people can see that post.
Okay, so this question frequently comes across my desk, and I generally come up with an answer for it. So one, there's the special recreation permit activities where you need a permit, competitive, and there's the whole definition. You guys could read this one. So the things that sort of your things don't fit that exactly. One is a duty of care. Are you a trip leader? And something goes wrong during the trip, are the participants going to sue you over it? Is there a duty of care? That's a big one. That's one that I'm looking for. You know, is it organized enough where there's that duty of care? You know, do you have waivers? You know, have you signed up? You know, when something goes haywire, you know, are they going to sue the BLM? Like, hey, this guy should have had an SRP. BLM, why did you give him a letter of agreement? Or you had your officer and they stopped your group and he let you continue. You know, is that going to come back on the federal government? That's really one back-end criteria that I tend to use a lot.
I like that.
I'm going to use the C word, closure. Not everybody likes to hear that word. As somebody that puts on an event in a very specific area, roughly 4,500 acres, or excuse me, 45,000 acres, at what point do we go and say we would like a closure to have exclusive use versus leaving the gates open and let anybody that wants to come in play while there's an organized event going on? And then, to add into that, at what point do I say, you're not registered for the event, you're not my problem?
Again, I'm asking questions for those that are looking to expand into other permit areas.
Yeah, I think my answer to that question is always going to be the dialogue with the local office. You talk closures, and that gets really complicated, and it's also very administrative dependent as well. Politics plays into that as well. That's really going to, we typically, when I was in the field office, that was left up to the applicant of whether or not they want a closure. One of the benefits of this document that we are really close to finishing, this programmatic environmental assessment that is analyzing all OHV use that is authorized by a special recreation permit, is we have instituted a closure if needed or wanted or requested. So that's nice. A closure, of course, is going to increase the costs because that has to be analyzed. And then also a Federal Register notice has to be published, so it's more time and more costly. But it's absolutely going to be one of those discussions that you're going to want to have with the local office as to how impactful, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but how that's going to impact the other users of the area as well, and that's going to play into that. And I know that was kind of more of a rhetorical question, but yeah, that's absolutely something to think about, especially when you grow and you have these large events, or you're having racing, or something specific where safety is concerned.
Megan and John, you guys request closures for the Gene Prim area, correct? In your permits?
I can answer that too. So Gene Prim is actually able to be closed because they do have the appropriate NEPA having been done in the past. The longer routes that we're familiar with, Vegas to Reno, Legacy Baja, and so on, contrary to popular belief, those are not closed courses. There's nothing illegal about some dumbass in a pickup truck tooling down the middle of a race course. It shows poor judgment, but it's not illegal because it's not a closed race course. One of the things I really appreciate with all the race organizations that I've worked with is the signs that you pound in where you're basically coming from non-competitive land to where your competitive events going on. They look like they're really scary and it's really, really close. So don't let the secret that this is really close leave this room, okay?
It's a race to the microphone.
What Matt's saying is like a public notice.
Yes, the public notice signs that we put up.
Yeah, obviously, like Matt just said, and Megan will agree, is like the Vegas Reno, the Bottom Nevada, it's too many miles to try and close, too vast of an area. So it's a kind of a courtesy. We put a lot of flag people out there at those locations to try and prevent the public getting onto that live track. As a courtesy, say, can you find an alternate route? Can we help you find an alternate route? But when it all comes down and said, we can't tell you you can't go. On the flip side, when we go to Parker, Arizona for our race, for the Parker races, that is a full land closure. And so that's kind of the difference there, is that it's completely closed off. There's a federal register that goes in, it's a week closure. We have to have manpower at all the access points, 24-hour manpower, making sure that the public's safe on those events.
I'm changing hats and going as a 44-year veteran of the Cal 4-wheel with events on National Forest. And the biggest reason for not being able for us on our events to get exclusive use is private inholdings. We have to, they keep saying, we have to allow people who own that property to have 24 hours access to it. So.
That's true. Going once, going twice. Anybody?
All right, everybody, thank you very much. While we're up here and uncomfy, tomorrow morning when you come in, we will be downstairs, Pam and probably Laura as well. I've run a couple quick errands early, but I'll be here as well. If you have brought a vehicle, four-wheel drive vehicle, whether it's a Jeep, truck, buggy, whatever, and you have a seat available, we're going to ask you about that so that we can offer those seats up to people who irresponsibly didn't bring their own buggy and their own ride. And we are going to go out to Petroglyphs that Rayette is so excited about because apparently she's not been out there. So yeah, it's going to be it's a relatively quick ride. I don't even think it's 20 miles. Dan, any idea? Yeah. I had not been out there until about a month ago, so now I'm going again. But it's an interesting ride. It's got a little bit different topography. One of the participants here today asked me what the dust is going to be like. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being sandstorm you can't see, it's probably going to be a 6 or a 7. So be prepared to be dirty if you're going to be in a buggy. Be prepared to change your air cleaners if you're going to be in a vehicle. So by all means, if anybody else has any questions, we'll be here kind of packing out here a little bit tonight, and we'll be around. Until then, I'll see everybody tomorrow morning. Thanks.
So there you have today's conclusion for the Wednesday edition of the Summit here in Virginia City at Piper's Opera House, brought to you by Nevada Off-Road Association, their annual summits. We'll be back at it again tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Join us that time. Until then, as always, Desert Riders.